Welcome everyone. For those who I have not yet met, my name is Kenna Dooley, and I'm the Director of Development for Children's Cancer Research Fund. So on behalf of our team, thank you for joining us this evening. It's a little bit different vibe when we can't be together in one room, but it's wonderful to see so many friendly faces and friends of CCRF on the call tonight. So thank you for joining us. Before we get started, I'm just going to make a few very quick announcements. This program is scheduled to run about an hour. First, we're going to hear from some special guests on the call, and then about halfway through, we're going to split into smaller groups. You all submitted so many great questions in advance that we will not have time to take more during the panel discussion, but if you could hang on to those and any others that come to mind, you could ask those of the researcher in your breakout session. After those breakouts, we will come back together, all of us, and hear from our new CEO, Daniel Gumnett. I know many of you are very anxious to meet him. I'd ask you to please remain on mute during the program, but you're welcome to keep your camera on. And we really do encourage that. We love to see your faces. So with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get started. As most of you know, CCRF exists because in 1979, a beautiful redheaded 13-year-old named Katie Hedgebeck, who was fighting leukemia, wanted to create a world where other kids with cancer would be able to live long, healthy lives. After Katie's passing, her family and friends vowed to fund life-saving research. In the 4 decades since, the circle of support created by the Hedgebecks has grown exponentially, and today it includes all of you. The past year has been filled with challenges, but you, the community that is CCRF, you've stepped up in incredible ways. In 2020, our mission has been fueled by donors in all 50 states, with international support from donors in 18 countries. With only 4% of government funding for cancer research dedicated to pediatric cancer, you know the children deserve better, and you have stepped up to meet their needs. This year, together, we're on track to raise more than $20 million, which means that CCRF will be able to award an unprecedented number of grants for innovative research and patient support. So far, at 20 institutions across the US and still counting. You all did this, and this is our shared success, so congratulations. Tonight we're focusing on cancer survivorship. We really do celebrate how far we've come with your support, but we also aim to understand the research that still needs to be done to ensure that every child with cancer grows up to be a happy, healthy survivor. With us tonight is Amanda Sullivan, whose daughter Izzy was diagnosed with a germ cell yolk sac tumor just after her first birthday. Amanda knows a lot about research, what research can mean to a childhood cancer family. She is a member of the CCRF SOAR Leadership Council, which is a group of community leaders supporting the next generation of cancer researchers. So here is Izzy's story.
Originally, they kind of thought maybe it was something in the bowels because that's more common at this age, but what they actually discovered was a tumor. So, and then, proceeded to do some testing and determined that it was cancerous. I still don't believe it, honestly, but I think it took us quite a while to actually process that. And between that day when we heard that it was actually cancerous and when she started chemo was like 3 days. So you just kind of go, with the process. It was really quick.
Having 2 kids, twins, it just kind of, it makes things a lot harder to, understand what's going on and being there for both of them, not only Izzy, but still being there for Isaiah as well. But, whatever it took.
Hi there. Thank you so much for your support. My name is Amanda Sullivan, and this is Izzy Sullivan. Izzy is our survivor. Izzy, how old are you?
3.
Izzy's 3 years old, and just after her first birthday, she was diagnosed with a germ cell yolk sac tumor. About 10 days after her birthday, we started chemo. She endured 8 rounds of chemo and surgery. We were able to finally get everything under control after and at a normal level for her tumor marker just a year ago. So she will be 4 in December, and we've been no evidence of disease since August of 2019, and we are so grateful for all of the medical expertise and support we received throughout her treatment. But now we face many concerns and worries as a family of a survivor. There are more than 15.5 million survivors, and there are many risks associated with that we worry about. In terms of Izzy, for at least 5 years, she's at risk for secondary cancers due to the chemo that she received. And we, really, until that 5 years is up, so we still got about 4 more years, she's not really out of the woods. And her case was very atypical. And she didn't really follow any of the trends of what doctors had seen with her type of cancer. So we just never really know what to expect. But so far she's been healthy at all her checkups, and we're so thankful for that. There are still things that she's unable to do. She has a twin brother, and when I think about some of the medical intervention and trauma she's gone through, even just simple visits to the dentist are very traumatic for her, and she's unable to sit in for a simple tooth cleaning. So there's a lot of things like that we still have to deal with, and there are other long-term side effects. Oh yes, and one of the things that unfortunately we have to do, I feel like as a result of the harsh chemo she received, she actually has a few cavities, and we're going to have her sedated here next month to have at least one tooth pulled that we weren't able to fix through normal measures. And there are other things too we worry about for her health. Long-term fertility is something that's always been a concern, especially considering where her tumor was and the type of chemo she's received. But yeah, so we really, for all of those reasons and many more, we really know how important it is to fund research and emerging scientists and things of that nature. So we really appreciate your support and everything you do to help kiddos like Izzy have a better outcome, fund research for outdated treatments and everything like that. So thank you so much. Izzy, can you say thank you?
Thank you.
I want to point out that with your support, the 5-year survival rate for children diagnosed with cancer has climbed to over 80%. That success is really a direct result of your generosity and your passion for research. But these gains have revealed a new challenge. I was talking with a longtime supporter of children's brain tumor research recently, and he said to me, Kenna, now we need to move the goalposts. Surviving cancer is no longer the end zone. We need to figure out how to successfully treat cancer, but in a way that doesn't compromise the long-term health of children. What that donor was referring to is the toxic nature of traditional cancer treatments. Childhood cancer survivors, yeah, they beat cancer, but they're more susceptible to a range of health complications throughout their lives, including infertility, obesity, cardiovascular disease, and poor bone health. But only 1 in 5 survivors receives the follow-up care and the customized guidance that they need. And we know that they deserve better. So today, I'm honored to introduce 3 experts in childhood cancer survivorship who will answer the questions that you all submitted and help us understand the work in this field. So Dr. Rachel Phelan. Dr. Phelan is an assistant professor of pediatrics at the Medical College of Wisconsin, Children's Wisconsin, where she specializes in pediatric blood and marrow transplantation and studies late effects following cancer and transplants. She is the director of the Next Steps Survivorship Program at Children's Wisconsin, and also serves as the scientific director for the Late Effects and Quality of Life Working Committee at the Center for International Blood and Marrow Transplant Research. Thanks for joining us, Rachel. Dr. Kareem Sadak is the director of the Childhood Cancer Survivor Program at the Masonic Cancer Center of the University of Minnesota and M Health Fairview Masonic Children's Hospital. His clinical and research expertise focuses on survivors of childhood cancer. Under his leadership, the Cancer Survivorship Program has several clinical studies open to enrollment and is actively collaborating across the university and around the country. Welcome, Dr. Sadak. And finally, Dr. Brenda Weigel. Dr. Weigel is the director of the Division of Pediatric Hematology Oncology at the University of Minnesota, where she holds the Lehman Family CCRF Endowed Chair in Pediatric Cancer. She is also the co-director of the Sarcoma Program and an associate director of the Cancer Experimental Therapeutics Initiative for the Masonic Cancer Center. We are grateful to all three of you for your time this evening. Thanks for joining us. Let's get started. I have a question that was submitted, and Dr. Phelan, I wonder if you could take this one first. Could you please tell us more about the physical and mental health issues that children and families deal with after they have beat cancer?
Sure, I'm happy to talk more about that. That's such an important question. And I just first of all want to say thank you to everybody for having me. And I don't think in my bio it was pointed out, but I also want to give acknowledgement to Brenda and Kareem because I did my fellowship at the University of Minnesota. And so they've taught me a lot of what I know. And so even though I'm at Wisconsin, I'm very grateful and happy to still be their colleagues and happy to be here with you and thankful for CCRF's support of me during my fellowship as well. But to speak a little bit more about that question, I think, there's a lot of continued, both physical and mental health issues that all of our cancer and bone marrow transplant survivors face. And it's also really important to note that all of these survivors have lived a very different journey. So hopefully we'll be able to hear that video that highlights Izzy's journey. But all of our survivors' paths are very unique. So they may have just had surgery as part of their treatment. They may have had surgery and chemotherapy or radiation, or have underwent a bone marrow transplant. And all of those different things and all of those different therapies really carry with them different potential short-term and long-term effects. So Kenna pointed out, some of the common things that we see these patients experience, including, issues with growth, issues with fertility, issues with bone health, and potentially issues with heart health, lung health, et cetera. And some of those things actually don't come to be an issue or a problem until they're many, many years post the end of their therapy. So even, far into adulthood. And so one of the really critical things is making sure that these patients are aware of, their unique journey and their unique risk factors that they have for these long-term complications so that they do receive the care that they need, long into adulthood. Not only that, but it's really critically important that their mental health is addressed. The patients that we take care of may have been treated when they were little babies and they may not remember what they experienced, as much as their parents did, or they may be young adults where this is really impactful in terms of, kind of halting a really critical part of their lives if they're in college or, starting out in their first job. And, no matter what, when they were treated, addressing the mental health aspect of things as they grow older is also really critical to their care. So since all of our patients have a really unique journey and their care needs to be tailored based on what that journey entailed, it's just really important that we continue to build these survivorship programs and that there is a multidisciplinary nature to them so that all of the different specialists that need to be involved are involved really throughout their lifetimes.
Makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Dr. Phelan. Dr. Sadak, one of the things that we hear about survivors is that they don't often get the care they need as young adults, but why is that? What kind of barriers do they face?
Yeah, there's two things that really come up over and over again. And one of them I'll start with is actually a lot of common sense, and that's adolescents and young adults, whether they have been through a cancer treatment or not, live with this sense of invincibility. This age group, this demographic has, for good reasons, a lot of high risk behaviors, a lot of challenges with getting preventative care. And many people that age don't need a regular healthcare provider, don't need routine healthcare. But that's not the case for childhood cancer survivors. We know, as Dr. Phelan said, there are so many aspects of their health and well-being that are at risk for long-term complications, specifically related to the treatments they received. And so that age group comes with a lot of challenges, but one of them that we're overcoming is making sure that they don't slip through the cracks for any fault of their own, but more from our end as the healthcare team, making sure they understand why this care needs to continue. And then the second thing, also has to do with survivors of that age range. It is, as we know, a very transient population. Some people at that age are going to college, universities, relocating, leaving their homes, their hometowns, their geography where their primary care providers and doctors and oncologists are. And then if we do keep in touch, well, maybe they live in a different dorm their second year of college, or have a new address when they relocate for a summer position or job, or join the workforce, which may make them even sometimes harder to connect with. So there comes with a lot of age appropriate, no surprises here, honestly, but we're dealing with a population that's high risk for health complications. And so all these issues that may not be that critical to an adolescent or young adult who has not had childhood cancer, it's a different story, because we know what to look out for, and we know how we can either catch this long-term complication early before it becomes serious or life-threatening, or prevent it altogether. But we need to keep them in the system and not let them slip through the cracks, especially during these times, these age ranges where it's so easy to happen.
Okay, that makes sense. So we understand the challenges, it sounds like. What are the solutions? How do we help ensure that survivors are plugged in to that care that they need?
Yeah, the solution starts years before a survivor becomes that older adolescent or young adult, in an age appropriate way, whether it's an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, a 12-year-old, 15-year-old. A lot of our care and part of our mission as survivorship programs is to educate, and not just a caregiver, but also the patient, the survivor, and really build, again, in age appropriate ways, through age appropriate messages. Why is it important to come to these appointments once a year? Why is it important to get these tests that for most of their life, their caregiver, parent, godparent, grandparent has taken them to the appointment, reminded them they have to come with them, called to schedule it. And that's a little bit of a different story as folks get older and are on their own. So a lot of it is the educational message. That's how we overcome these barriers. But then secondly is the logistics, the nuts and bolts of the education. Nobody's reading a pamphlet anymore. Nobody's reading a textbook. If it's not online, it better be ready on your phone. And that's how these patients are receiving, processing, and taking this information and using it for their own good. And so we've changed the way we communicate with survivors.
Mm-hmm.
We've changed the way we deliver educational messages. The way that we connect with them needs to be in a way that resonates with them. And we know that changes across the age continuum or the spectrum of age, and we make sure our messages and our educational lessons are appropriate to that.
And I think later on, our guests are going to hear about the survivorship website that you've been involved with building at the University of Minnesota. And I think Daniel will allude to that and how CCRF funding through a CCRF donor enabled that project to happen. So thank you. Dr. Weigel, many of our new cancer drugs today are targeted with a focus on reducing these toxicities and late effects. But what does that mean for survivorship research today and then for care 10, 15, 20 years down the road?
Yeah, and thank you for this really important question. And as many of you have seen in the news over the last 5-10 years, there's been an explosion of new drugs to treat cancer, targeted drugs, immunotherapy drugs, lots and lots of drugs. Actually more drugs than we in pediatrics have patients to actually study some of these drugs. And everything we know about the risks that Dr. Phelan talked about has really been garnered over following survivors of childhood cancer for decades, with drugs that were what we call classic chemotherapy medicines. They caused a lot of damage to cells and sort of weren't specific, and any cell that was dividing was a potential target, but it wasn't really targeted, as well as sort of things like radiation therapy. Whereas now these drugs are very specific. And one of the real potential benefits for that is that we decrease down both the short-term and the long-term side effects. But what we're learning is that it is, as particularly adults who have had some of these drugs and now children, is that we are probably facing a different set of short and long-term side effects. And we may not be actually avoiding some of the side effects that we thought we were. So some of this, what we call small molecule inhibitors, we're learning as adults have had these, over the last decade, they still have heart problems that are likely contributed to from these targeted drugs. So we thought maybe we're escaping some of that, but we aren't. And one of the things I think that really is changing the landscape with all of these new drugs in the survivorship world are two really important things. One is the FDA and regulatory agencies are realizing that these are really incredibly important things that influence the long-term use of these drugs, and are now mandating 15-year follow-up for patients enrolled on clinical trials. That's significant. That puts a significant burden on our survivorship programs, our ability to track patients, as Dr. Sadak mentioned. And it also puts a significant burden on how you do this across the cancer industry. What is the standard? What are the new things? And it's also things that we have never really tracked at that well. And Dr. Phelan mentioned things sort of like mental health, growth and development, and long-term neuropsychological outcomes of a developing child. Some of these very targeted therapies hit very specific ways that cells grow and mature. And we don't honestly know what some of those long-term implications are of hitting potentially some of these critical pathways in a developing child. So I think there really are a lot of opportunities, but also I think it shifts really a focus to being more and more critical about following these patients long-term, because we're entering essentially somewhat of a new era, not only in drug development, but in survivorship care.
We answer the next question then. So I will move on to our last question. And please feel free, all three of you, to answer. What do you wish that more people, especially donors like we have on the call today, and supporters, fundraisers who are passionate about childhood cancer and better outcomes for kids, what do you wish that we all understood better about why cancer survivorship is such an important part of the experience?
I can start with that one, kind of. I would say, one thing that probably isn't known, or certainly isn't celebrated enough, and I'd want donors and everyone to know, is survivorship research really is a team sport. It is just like the research that happens to find a cure or to test a new drug, but in our case, to make sure a child has the best quality of life for the rest of his or her life. And so it takes more than just an oncologist or just one oncologist or one university or one medical center or one specialist. It really does happen in ways that are most impactful when you bring a team together with varied expertise, complementary skills that all share the same passion with the same goals in mind. And when that happens with the support of donations and funds, like have been raised through the CCRF, that's when special research happens. That's when the impactful research happens that changes the life for a childhood cancer survivor.
Yeah, and I'll add to that and just emphasize that as well, Dr. Sadak. So, a lot of the research we do is not only with oncology, but, with cardiologists and endocrinologists and all of these other specialists across the spectrum, because it really does impact these survivors, in all different, not just from a cancer perspective, but in all different ways. And, this type of research also, like Dr. Sadak said, requires large group of patients, not only across the US, but across the world. And so we have international collaborations that are really exciting. And we learn from each other, in terms of the best way that we can take care of these patients. And all of that type of research really requires a lot of support. But as Dr. Weigel said, more and more people are understanding how important that is and how many lives this touches as we get better and better at curing cancer. Just the vast number of these cancer survivors that are out there and really require this ongoing research and care just becomes more and more apparent.
And one very last thing I will add to what Dr. Phelan and Sadak have said is, I think an important concept is that survivorship care and survivorship research are embedded, because you can't do the research without providing the care. And one of the things as well is that we've spent decades really researching what are the late effects, what are these side effects. We still have to continue to do that as drugs change, but what we also are entering is an era of intervention where we are studying and learning and developing strategies to actually try to intervene and lessen some of these late effects, and maybe targeting people who are more likely to get these effects so that we can get them into appropriate therapies for those potential late effects earlier. So instead of thinking of it as, just we're following you just to see what happens, is we really need to shift the pendulum and say, this is lifelong care, but these are also, as we learn more, we may be actually able to change the course for some of the potential side effects these patients face, and may ultimately truly impact their quality of life in ways we've never thought possible until recently.
There's a lot to be optimistic about. Thanks for helping us understand both the challenges, but the really incredible work that your teams are focused on. We appreciate it, that too. So I'm really excited at this time to introduce you to Daniel Gumnett, our new CEO, who joined CCRF this past August. Daniel?
Thank you, Kenna. And is my audio working okay?
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. It's a really tough act to follow Izzy and her mom. That was a really beautiful story and really highlighted a lot of what we're talking about tonight. And it's I have to say it's an honor to have been given the opportunity to lead CCRF. Over the past 90 days, I've especially appreciated the warm welcome I received from CCRF's founding families, the board members, partners, and staff. As many of you know, CCRF has had a long and unique relationship with the University of Minnesota, And it's been my privilege to get to know our amazing University of Minnesota partners. And I'm also looking forward to spending time with our research partners in coming days across the country. We are truly a community that believes in a world without childhood cancer. I'd like to continue our conversation for a few minutes about the challenges and opportunities in pediatric cancer survivorship. It is an evolving and promising field, and what we haven't talked a lot about is that it's significantly underfunded. From a research perspective, you heard from Rachel, Kareem, and Brenda, and it's a critical time for us to support childhood cancer survivors. We heard about the risks of toxic treatments, as Izzy's mom was talking about, the importance of age-appropriate education that Kareem was talking about, and the need to collaborate across fields and institutions. Importantly, we heard, as cancer therapies evolve to more targeted drugs and activating the immune system to fight cancer, we expect better outcomes for kids. But we still don't know the long-term effect of these new advanced therapies on children's growing bodies. And this is a very important area to focus our research investments. Additionally, for young adults navigating our complex healthcare systems, some of whom have no memory of their cancer treatment, we must help them to get the specialized care they need as survivors. Success will require innovative partnerships between policymakers, survivors, providers, health systems, and payers. This is an area where our community, the community here on the Zoom call, can make a big difference. Not only do childhood cancer survivors have medical care needs, but there's also an opportunity to support their mental health and general well-being. If we use an integrative and whole families approach, we'll achieve better outcomes for survivors. This will require continued investments in innovative family programs and services, a focus on community building, and additional investments in clever uses of interactive technology. As we've discussed earlier in the evening, survivor research is significantly underfunded. CCRF is committed to addressing this funding gap. Through our unique and deep relationship with the researchers at the University of Minnesota and our national fundraising and grant making, a few examples of our commitment include a survivor-focused research grant in 2021. Next year, we'll launch a special grant award that will focus on the biggest issues of survivorship. Scientists from Minnesota and around the country will be invited to apply for these with their innovative ideas. Second is Camp Norden. We're hosting an inaugural year of camp for childhood cancer survivors, where kids gather in a safe environment to spend time with their peers. This will be an amazing opportunity for members of our community to volunteer. Third is the University of Minnesota's Integrative Therapies Survivorship website. With generous support from the Blythe Brendan Mann Foundation, CCRF has funded the development of a new resource called Taking Charge of Your Survivorship. This resource was created because when children returned home from their stay in the hospital, the integrative therapies they relied on, such as touch therapy, music therapy, conversations about well-being, stayed at the hospital. This website provides children and their caregivers access to resources and information about the integrative therapies they received, and methods for implementing them at home. And then additionally, as we mentioned briefly, the Lions Club and CCRF helped fund Kareem's really important intervention work, which I believe is a smartphone app. Those are just a few of the examples of the work that we're doing with your support. None of this incredible work would be possible without the funding from generous donors and tireless advocates like all of you on this Zoom call tonight. So Kenna, would you please tell us more about the contributions from CCRF supporters who make this life-saving work possible?
My pleasure. It's my favorite thing to do, is celebrate all of you who are on this call. As I mentioned earlier tonight, we're here today because of your generous support. Thanks to you. Since 1981, CCRF has raised more than $200 million, and we've directed those funds to research, education, and quality of life programs. Norman, Diana, can you believe what you started? We want to recognize all of you who have made this possible. There are more cancer survivors, childhood cancer survivors today than ever because of you. So a few shout outs here. First, I want to thank all of our friends on the call who've been behind this mission from 1 year to nearly 4 decades. And I'm looking at some of you right now who've been with CCRF since the very beginning. Thank you for trusting us to invest your contributions in the most impactful ways. Your gifts are saving lives. We also owe a special thanks to our Wing Society members. So you, Wing Society members, you have ensured a promising future for childhood cancer research through your estate plans. You are special to CCRF and we thank you. Also on the call tonight, we have supporters from across the country who coordinate and participate in fundraising events. We thank the Great Cycle Challenge riders and champions who helped us this year raise over $14 million on their bikes. We thank our longtime captains and fundraisers of the Walk for Childhood Cancer and the organizers of the Loop Tech 140 Golf Invitational, who despite the pandemic had a record-breaking year. We are grateful to Meg McElroy. Meg is an elementary school teacher in New York City who every year hosts a fundraiser around the holidays to benefit children's cancer research. We all do want to express our sincere gratitude to the co-chairs of DREAM, Jane Pirtle and Megan Goodrich, and to the dedicated committee members who came alongside you and displayed incredible ingenuity and resolve over the past year, given all of its unforeseen challenges, and stuck with us and will be with us in 2021 as well. I want to thank Dan Seaman in KS95. Dan, on behalf of all of us at CCRF, your team was really the catalyst behind the sharing of Zach Sobiek's song, Clouds, and his inspirational story, which is now a movie, if we can believe it, being watched around the world on Disney+, and that has put a spotlight on the need for osteosarcoma research funding. We thank the members of our board of directors, our various volunteer committees, and the countless other individuals who've shown their support of childhood cancer research through gifts of time, talent, and treasure. Thank you tonight to Drs. Weigel and Sidak and Phelan for sharing your knowledge with us and for your dedication to healthier lives for our youngest cancer survivors. And lastly, we are grateful to the Sullivan family and many other amazing families who allow us to share their stories throughout the year very bravely. Thank you. Daniel, as our new CEO, is there anything else that you wanted to add before we say goodnight to this remarkable group of supporters with us on the call?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you, Kenna. This has certainly been a year of uncertainty for all of us, but it's also reinforced our strong belief that research, when it's fully funded and being done by the brightest minds in the field, like some of the people, excuse me, the cleaning crew is coming in. This is kind of exciting. The brightest minds of the field, like some of the Kareem and others who are here tonight, can make a difference in kids fighting cancer. And we are truly a community that believes in a world without childhood cancer. So on behalf of myself and everyone at CCRF and families like Izzy's, thank you so much for your support. I also want to thank Kenna and the talented staff from CCRF that helped organize this virtual event. They did an amazing job, and they will end this Zoom session in a few moments. So have a great rest of the evening, everybody, and thank you very, very much.